Today, I'm going to talk about a book called How Will You Measure Your Life? It was first published in 2012 and it's been in publishing since then. The book draws some very interesting life lessons from the business world and then apply them into your personal lives. How you can have a good career, how you can have a fulfilling relationships, and how you can lead a life of integrity and meaning. Some of these questions are really basic, and one might argue that for the same reason they are profound. And to know more about what this book is all about, you can visit our website www.kalampedia.org, where I've just published a piece on this book. Here on this podcast, I'm going to read a small segment from the book. The segment is called Investing for Future Happiness. It's from the second part of the book where the authors are stressing on the idea of finding happiness in your relationships. So let's begin. It can be all too easy to default to a bad money approach in our lives. 2. Many of us thrive on the intensity of a demanding job, one that we believe in and enjoy. We like proving what we can do under pressure. Our projects, our clients, and our colleagues challenge us. We invest ourselves in our jobs. But in order to accomplish all this, we start to think of our jobs as requiring all our attention. And that's exactly what we give them. We call into work from remote vacation spots. In fact, we may never take all the vacation days we are allowed. There's simply too much to be done. Work becomes how we identify ourselves. We take our smartphones with us everywhere, checking for news constantly, as if not being connected all the time would mean we are going to miss out on something really important. We expect the people who are closest to us to accept that our schedule is simply too demanding to make much time for them. After all, they want to see us succeed too, right? We find ourselves forgetting to return emails and phone calls from our friends and our families, neglecting birthdays and their celebrations that used to be important to us. Unfortunately, the same consequences that businesses face for failing to invest for the future apply to us as well. While most of us do have a deliberate strategy of creating deep, love-filled relationships with members of our family and our friends, in reality, we invest in a strategy for our lives that we would never have aspired to. Having shallow friendships with many but deep friendships with none. Becoming divorced, sometimes repeatedly, and having children who feel alienated from us within our own homes or who are raised by a step-parent, sometimes thousands of miles away. And we can't turn the clock back. One of my neighbors, whom I'll call Steve, told me years ago that he had always wanted to own and operate his own business. He had many opportunities to work for and learn from someone else in his profession, and at very attractive compensation too. But he was never willing to part with his dream of being his own boss. That meant long hours at work, learning from relatively simple mistakes to build up his own learning from firm. His friends and family were understanding, though. After all, Steve was not doing it just because it was important to him. He was doing it to provide for his family. The meagerness of Steve's investments of time in his family ultimately took its toll. Just as his company was finally taking off, his marriage fell apart. When he needed the support of his siblings and friends as he navigated the pain of divorce, he found himself quite alone. He sought the returns on an investment he had not made. No one intentionally deserted him in his hour of need. It was just that he had neglected them for so long that they no longer felt close to him, and they worried that any intervention might be considered an intrusion. Steve moved out of his house into a small apartment across town. He tried to make it nice for his 2 sons and 2 daughters when they visited. Though he had always left such things to his wife when they were married, he worked hard to try to come up with new things to do and ways to make their time together fun. But he was fighting an uphill battle. By the time his children were in middle school, the idea of spending every other weekend with Steve during his visiting privileges was not that appealing to them. They had to leave their friends and their home to move in with their dad in his Spartan apartment, only to go out to dinner, work in the business with him, or maybe to see a movie. It soon lost its charm. Just as Steve was feeling he needed time with his children, they started opting out of their visits with dad whenever they could. Now he looks back over all those years and wishes he had prioritized differently and invested in those relationships before he needed them to pay off for him. Steve is hardly an isolated case. We all know people like him, and I think on some level, many of us fear becoming that person in our later years. There's a reason that the film It's a Wonderful Life has been so resonant for decades. What matters most in the darkest hours of George Bailey's life are the many personal relationships he has invested in along the way. He recognizes by the end of the film that though he is poor, his life is rich in friendships. We all want to feel like George Bailey, but that simply isn't possible if we haven't done the work investing in those relationships with friends and family throughout our lives. Each of us can point to 1 or 2 friendships we have unintentionally neglected when life got busy. You might be hoping that the bonds of your friendship are strong enough to endure such neglect, but that's seldom the case. Even the most committed friends will attempt to stay the course for only so long before they choose to invest their own time, energy, and friendship somewhere else. If they do, the loss will be yours. People in their later years in life so often lament that they didn't keep in better touch with friends and relatives who once mattered profoundly to them. Life just seemed to get in the way. The consequences of letting that happen, however, can be enormous. I've known too many people like Steve who have had to walk through a healthy struggle or a divorce or a job loss alone, with nobody to provide a sounding board or other means of support. This can be the loneliest place in the world.